Less than 60 seconds remained before the final course arrived, and someone died at the corner table. Thandiwe's hands were slick as she pressed a pen against a crumpled receipt, ink smearing slightly as she folded it into a tiny square. The paper felt impossibly thin, like it might dissolve before it reached him. Around her, the Jade Pavilion hummed with expensive conversation, Korean and English mixing with the delicate percussion of silverware on porcelain, designer fabric rustling against leather, the constant undertone of power and money-making deals over elaborate meals. Outside, Seoul's bitter January wind hammered the windows, frost spreading across the glass in delicate patterns. Inside, the heat pressed down like a weight. Too many bodies, too much at stake, too little time. Walking toward the corner booth felt like moving through thick water. Each step required thought, effort. Her uniform restricted her breathing. She couldn't pull enough air into her lungs. Kwon Ji-won sat with his back to the panoramic window, overlooking the glittering sprawl of Gangnam below. Everything about him communicated absolute control. The patient way his fingers rested on the white tablecloth. The cut of his dark suit that probably cost more than 3 years of her salary combined. His hair fell across his forehead with that particular precision wealthy Korean men achieved, casual yet deliberate. He was beautiful in the way expensive things are beautiful. Remote, inaccessible, lethal. Beside him, Isabella Rossi leaned close, her lips the exact color of fresh blood, whispering something that made the massive diamonds at her throat catch the candlelight and scatter it across the table like broken glass. She looked like a woman dreaming about her future. In reality, she was planning his death. 30 minutes earlier, Thandiwe had been in the wine cellar. The restaurant called it a cellar, but it was really a temperature-controlled shrine, all backlit glass and environmental precision, keeping bottles worth more than her student loans at perfect storage conditions. She'd gone down to get a specific Barolo for another table, navigating between rows of expensive French vintages when she heard voices, female, sharp. Speaking Italian that her limited language skills barely helped her understand. She'd frozen between shelves of Chianti, her hand still reaching for a bottle she'd never actually grab, and listened to Isabella Rossi arrange a murder in 3 languages. Italian first, laying out positions. The corner booth next to the window. Then rapid Korean that Thandiwe followed better. Already in place, 4 of them strategically positioned. 1 at the bar, 3 near the kitchen. Then something else, Slavic-sounding, harsh and efficient, all consonants and cold precision. Thandiwe should have cleared her throat, made her presence known, done what any professional server would do. Instead, she'd stood there with her heart trying to punch through her ribcage and listened to a woman confirm an assassination like she was confirming dinner reservations. The timeline was clear despite the language barriers. After the final course, when everyone was distracted, a clean hit. Expensive heels had clicked toward the stairs. Thandiwe had pressed herself against the wine racks, desperately hopping shadows and bottles would hide her. Through gaps between vintages she couldn't pronounce, she'd glimpsed Isabella. Tall, elegant, wearing cream silk that cost more than Thandiwe's father's last surgery. Dark hair arranged in something elaborate, those diamonds catching light like a warning. Isabella Rossi, currently sitting at the corner booth playing devoted fiancé to the man she'd just arranged to kill. The perfume had lingered after Isabella left, something French and floral that now smelled like funeral flowers. Thandiwe had counted to 30 before her legs remembered how to work. When she'd climbed back upstairs without the Barolo, her mind was already racing through what she'd heard, trying to piece fragments into understanding. Back on the main floor, everything had clicked into horrible focus. The corner booth, window position, Kwon Ji-won and Isabella Rossi, Seoul's most photographed power couple. Everyone knew what he was, even if nobody said it directly. Korean organized crime dressed in Italian tailoring and old family money. She was Italian syndicate royalty, her family name whispered alongside words like network and organization and family. Their engagement had been in society magazines for months, a corporate merger disguised as romance. Thandiwe had scanned the restaurant with new eyes, her serving tray pressed against her chest like armor. One man at the bar, late 30s, dark suit, glass of whiskey, he'd been nursing without drinking for 40 minutes. He wasn't watching the soccer match on the screen. He was watching the corner booth. 3 men hovering near the kitchen entrance, menus open, never ordering. 2 had positioned themselves with clear sightlines. The third kept his hand inside his jacket. Her heart had kicked so hard she tasted metal. She'd looked back at the corner booth. At Kwon Ji-won laughing at something Isabella said, completely unaware the woman stroking his wrist had just choreographed his execution. That within the hour, when the dessert cart arrived with its elaborate presentation that would draw every eye in the room, 4 men were going to fill him with bullets. Thandiwe could walk away, clock out early, say she felt sick. Let whatever was coming simply happen. Men like Kwon Ji-won didn't end up in her world by accident. He'd made choices, earned enemies. Maybe this was justice wearing a different face. But then she'd thought about her father in that narrow hospital bed, in Accra, tubes and wires keeping him tethered to life. She'd thought about every nurse who'd shown him kindness they weren't required to show. Every doctor who'd fought insurance companies and bureaucracy to keep him breathing. She'd thought about mercy that didn't ask if you deserved it before offering itself. She'd thought, I can't just watch someone die. So she'd grabbed the receipt, written 7 words that would either save him or destroy her, and started walking toward the corner booth like she was walking off the edge of the world. Welcome to K-AFRIQUE TV, where we bring you the most gripping tales of love, danger, and destiny. If you're captivated by this intense journey, hit that like button, subscribe so you never miss an episode, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your support keeps these stories alive. Now let's continue. Her reflection in the wine glasses looked ghostly as she approached. Each step felt weighted, time doing strange things around her, stretching and compressing. She noticed everything with painful clarity. The scratch of polyester against her skin, the whisper of her shoes on marble. How Isabella's laugh sounded like breaking glass. Your whiskey, sir? Her voice came out steady, professional, like she hadn't just overheard a murder plot, like her hands weren't shaking. She set the crystal tumbler down on the white tablecloth with careful precision. The amber liquid caught the candlelight, glowing like trapped fire. Then she did what every server is trained never to do. She touched him. Her thumb pressed against the back of his hand as she slid the folded receipt under his coaster, the contact lasting maybe a second, a violation of every boundary between his world and hers, between power and service, between the person who had everything and the person who had nothing left to lose. Kwon Ji-won's eyes snapped to hers. They were darker than she'd expected, not cold but calculating, the kind of eyes that could read intentions written in the space between heartbeats. His gaze held hers a beat too long, and she felt something shift in her chest. Not attraction exactly, but recognition, like looking at a dangerous animal that could either let you pass or end you. Read this, she mouthed silently. Please. His fingers closed around the receipt, palm hiding it completely. Has something upset you about the service, darling? Isabella's voice cut between them, sweet poison wrapped in silk. Ji-won's expression didn't change. He lifted his glass, took a deliberate sip of whiskey, and with his other hand unfolded the note beneath the table where Isabella couldn't see. Thandiwe stood there, tray clutched against her chest, watching his face for any reaction. Nothing, not a flicker, not a flinch. Just those dark eyes processing 7 words. Your fiancé sold you out. They're in position. Then his jaw tightened, almost invisible unless you were looking for it, unless you were watching for the moment comprehension hit. He knew. Ji-won set his glass down with a soft sound that somehow cut through every other noise in the restaurant. When he spoke, his voice was smooth, controlled, the kind of calm that came before violence. I'd like to make a toast. Isabella blinked, her smile flickering. We haven't even ordered dessert yet. Now, he gestured to Thandiwe without looking away from Isabella. Bring another glass, same pour. Thandiwe hesitated, looking between them. Isabella's perfectly composed face showed the first crack, a tightness around her eyes, a stiffness in her shoulders. I already have wine, Ji-won, she said, voice light but strained. Then you'll have whiskey too. It wasn't a request. Thandiwe walked back to the bar on autopilot, poured the second whiskey with hands that wouldn't stop shaking and returned. The restaurant continued around them. Conversation, laughter, the soft jazz bleeding from hidden speakers, completely unaware the corner booth was a bomb with a lit fuse. She set the glass in front of Isabella. Her red nails gleamed as she reached for it, but Ji-won's hand shot out, catching her wrist. Let's switch, he said softly. I'll drink yours, you drink mine. The temperature at the table dropped 10 degrees. Isabella's laugh came out wrong. That's odd even for you. Is it? Ji-won's smile was a weapon. I thought people in love did romantic things like that, sharing, trusting. He pushed his glass toward her, holding her gaze. Or is there some reason you don't want to drink what I've been drinking? The silence stretched. Thandiwe stood frozen, watching Isabella's face cycle through emotions before settling on something carefully blank. Of course not. She picked up his glass with a hand that trembled slightly. "To loyalty," Ji-won said. "To loyalty," Isabella echoed. They drank. Nothing happened. The whiskey wasn't poisoned, but Isabella's hesitation had confirmed everything. Ji-won set down the glass and looked directly at Thandiwe, really looked at her for the first time, taking in her name tag, her face, the fear she couldn't quite hide. "Thandiwe Okonkwo," he read slowly, his Korean accent turning her name into something foreign and dangerous. "Tell me, Thandiwe, do you believe in fate?" Her throat closed. "I'm not sure, sir." Neither did I. He leaned back in his seat, one arm draped casually over the booth. Until about 60 seconds ago, Isabella's face went white, and that's when Thandiwe realized she'd just started a war. The restaurant continued its expensive symphony around them, delicate sounds of wealth and power conducting itself with practiced elegance. But at the corner booth, everything had stopped. Isabella's red nails gleamed against white linen as she reached for her wine glass, the movement suddenly mechanical, wrong. Ji-won sat perfectly still, a predator calculating which direction his prey would run. "Thandiwe," he said her name again, tasting each syllable. "How long have you worked here?" Her mouth went dry. "Almost a year, sir. And in that year, how many murder plots have you stumbled across?" The question landed like a slap. Isabella's laugh came out too high, too forced. "Ji-won, sweetheart, you're scaring the poor girl. She probably just saw someone suspicious and got nervous." "Is that what happened, Thandiwe?" His eyes never left hers. They were obsidian in the candlelight, ancient and bottomless. "Did you just get nervous?" She couldn't speak, couldn't move. The receipt was still in his hand, her handwriting stark against white paper, 7 words that had just painted a target on her back. A subtle shift rippled through the restaurant. One of the men near the kitchen stood up, his hand sliding inside his jacket. At the bar, the man with the untouched whiskey turned his body slightly, angling for a better view. Ji-won saw it. She watched calculation flash across his face, cold and instant and lethal. "I think," he said softly, standing in one fluid movement, "we should discuss this somewhere more private." Isabella's hand shot out, gripping his wrist. "We haven't had dessert. I've lost my appetite." He pulled free with surgical precision. Then he turned to Thandiwe, and his expression shifted into something that made her blood run cold. Fury, disgust. The mask of an angry customer about to ruin someone's night. His hand closed around her upper arm like a vice. "You," he hissed loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "just spilled whiskey on a 3,000,001 suit." She hadn't. Her tray had been empty, but the lie crystallized instantly, giving him a reason to manhandle her, to drag her away from the table without raising immediate alarm. "I'm so sorry, sir. Sorry doesn't pay for custom tailoring." He yanked her forward, and she stumbled, her hip hitting the table edge. The violence in his grip was real enough to make her gasp, theatrical enough to make other diners look away in second-hand embarrassment. He pulled her toward the kitchen entrance, moving fast. Behind them, she heard Isabella's voice, sharp with panic disguised as irritation. "Ji-won. Don't be absurd, just send her home. I'm going to speak to her manager." His voice cut through the restaurant like a blade. "And then I'm going to have her fired." They were 10 feet from the kitchen doors. The 3 men who'd been loitering near the entrance shifted, hands moving inside jackets. She saw calculation in their eyes. Was this part of the plan? Was Ji-won just being his usual controlling self? Or had he figured it out? 5 feet. Ji-won's grip on her arm shifted, his fingers finding the pulse point at her wrist. He pressed down. "When we go through those doors," he whispered, his mouth so close to her ear that anyone watching would think he was berating her, "turn left, don't stop, don't look back." The kitchen doors swung open and the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the jade pavilion whole, not gradual, not flickering, absolute and instant like someone had erased the world. The jazz died mid-note. Crystal shattered against marble. A woman screamed. Ji-won moved. 1 second Thandiwe was standing upright. The next, she was being propelled forward through the kitchen doors with enough force to knock the air from her lungs. Emergency lighting kicked in. Dim red bulbs that turned everything into a nightmare landscape of shadows and blood-colored light. The kitchen was pure chaos. Chefs shouted in Korean and English and languages she couldn't identify as pans clattered and something heavy crashed to the floor. Through the crimson haze, she saw figures moving with purpose that had nothing to do with cooking. "Left," Ji-won's voice cut through the noise. She ran. Her cheap work shoes skidded on slick tile as she bolted past prep stations, past industrial ovens radiating heat like open furnaces. Behind her came the sound of impact, flesh on flesh, a grunt of pain, something metallic skittering across the floor. She risked a glance back. Ji-won fought like violence was his native language. A man in white chef's whites lunged at him with a knife that was definitely not for chopping vegetables. Ji-won caught his wrist, twisted, and the knife clattered away. He drove his elbow into the man's throat with surgical precision, then spun him into a second attacker hard enough that both men went down in a tangle of limbs. 3 more came through the swinging doors, not the men from the dining room. These were kitchen staff or people wearing kitchen whites as camouflage. One of them spotted her. "The girl," he shouted in accented English. "Grab the girl." Terror shot through her like electricity. She grabbed the first thing her hand found, a pot of hot oil sitting on the range, and without thinking, without hesitating, she hurled it at him. The oil caught him across the face and chest. His screams were inhuman, primal. He dropped to his knees, clawing at his burning skin. The smell hit her scorched flesh and hot metal, and her stomach tried to climb up her throat. "Move, Thandiwe." Ji-won was suddenly beside her, his hand finding the small of her back, propelling her forward again. Blood streaked his white dress shirt. She couldn't tell if it was his or someone else's. They burst through another set of doors into dry storage. 50-kilo bags of rice and flour stacked floor to ceiling, creating a maze of narrow passages. The red emergency lighting barely penetrated here, leaving pools of absolute darkness between the shelves. Footsteps thundered behind them. Voices shouted in Italian. Ji-won pulled her into a gap between shelving units, pressing them both flat against the concrete wall. The space was so narrow her chest was crushed against his, her face buried in the blood-stained fabric of his shirt. He smelled like expensive cologne and copper and something darker, adrenaline maybe, or the particular scent of violence. His heart hammered against her forehead, fast but steady, not panicked, just ready. "How many?" she whispered, her breath fogging against his chest. "Too many." His voice was barely audible, his lips brushing the top of her head as he spoke. The kitchen was full of them. This wasn't just a hit. This was an invasion. 3 men entered the storage area, their shadows stretching grotesquely across walls in the red light. They moved methodically, checking between shelves, weapons drawn, not guns, knives, and something that looked like a garrote. They wanted this quiet. Ji-won's arm wrapped around her waist, holding her so still she wasn't sure she was breathing. His other hand moved to his ankle, and when it came back up, there was a gun in it. Small, black, lethal. The nearest man was 5 feet away. 4, 3. She could see his face now in the crimson glow. Young, maybe mid-20s, with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. He was looking right at their hiding spot. Time stretched. She felt every beat of her heart, every molecule of air moving in and out of her lungs. Ji-won's finger rested on the trigger, his body coiled tight beneath expensive fabric. The man took another step forward. Then somewhere in the kitchen, glass shattered, followed by shouting in Korean. The man's head whipped toward the sound. He gestured to his companions, and all 3 of them moved back toward the kitchen doors. Ji-won waited until their footsteps faded before exhaling. The breath moved through his chest, expanding and contracting against hers. For a moment neither of them moved, just stood there in the darkness, pressed together by necessity and survival, while chaos raged around them. "Your people," she whispered. "My people." He pulled back slightly, putting an inch of space between them. In the red light his face looked carved from stone, all sharp angles and shadows. A cut above his eyebrow leaked blood down the side of his face, making him look like something from a nightmare. "They'll create a distraction, but we need to move now." "The back exit's been compromised," a voice said from behind them. They spun. A man stood blocking the path to the rear door, backlit by emergency lighting. He was massive, easily 6'4", built like he'd been carved from a mountain. And he was pointing a gun directly at Thandiwe's head. "Hyung," Ji-won said, and there was something in his voice she couldn't read. Not fear, recognition maybe, or betrayal. "Sorry, boss." The big man's expression was carefully neutral. "Orders from the top. Min-seok," the name came out like a curse. "Your brother sends his regards, and his regrets, nothing personal." Min-seok's finger tightened on the trigger. Ji-won moved with impossible speed. He grabbed a 50-kilo bag of rice from the nearest shelf and hurled it at Min-seok's head. The bag exploded on impact, white grains erupting everywhere, creating a blizzard effect in the crimson emergency light. Min-seok fired blind. The shot went wide, the crack deafening in the enclosed space. Then Thandiwe was on the floor, Ji-won's body covering hers as bullets punched through rice bags above them. White powder cascading down like snow, wood splintered, metal pinged. The world became gunfire and screaming, and the weight of Ji-won pressing her into cold concrete. "Stay down," he growled against her ear, Then he was rolling off her, returning fire. Muzzle flash lit up the storage room in strobing white bursts. Minseok went down, not dead but hit. He clutched his shoulder, weapon clattering away. Two more men burst through the kitchen doors, and suddenly it was a storm of bullets. Thandiwe pressed herself flat, hands over her head, rice grains digging into her palms. Something hot grazed her upper arm. Not a bullet, but close. The shock made her gasp. Back door now. Jiwon's hand found hers, yanking her to her feet. They ran, stumbling through rice that crunched like snow. The back door loomed ahead, metal and industrial, marked with a glowing green exit sign. Jiwon hit it at full speed, shoulder first like a battering ram. The door exploded open and Seoul winter slammed into them. The cold was brutal. Temperature had to be -15. Wind screaming through the alley with enough force to steal breath from lungs. Snow swirled in frantic spirals, turning the world into a whiteout that was the exact opposite of the restaurant's golden warmth. Thandiwe's server uniform, thin polyester blouse and cheap slacks designed for climate control, not survival, was criminally inadequate. Within seconds, the wind cut through to her skin, turning her sweat ice cold. Her teeth started chattering so hard she bit her tongue. Jiwon didn't slow down. He pulled her down the alley, their shoes crunching through dirty snow and ice. Behind them, the back door banged open again, voices shouting. A black Stinger sat at the alley's mouth, engine running, exhaust creating ghosts in the freezing air. Jiwon wrenched open the back door and physically threw her inside. She landed on leather seats that smelled like new car and gun oil. He dove in after her, slamming the door. "Drive," he barked in Korean to the man behind the wheel. The Stinger lurched forward, tires spinning on ice before finding purchase. Through the rear window, Thandiwe saw figures spilling out of the restaurant's back entrance. Too many to count, weapons raised. One of them aimed at their vehicle. The rear windshield spiderwebbed but didn't break, bulletproof glass. The sound of impact was dull, distant, like someone tapping on an aquarium. They sped away, leaving the Jade Pavilion behind in a blur of snow and muzzle flash. Inside the Stinger, silence descended. Only their ragged breathing and the whisper of tires on icy pavement. Jiwon leaned forward, speaking rapid Korean to the driver. Instructions, coordinates she couldn't tell. Blood dripped from the cut above his eyebrow, spattering on leather. She looked down at herself. Rice grains clung to her clothes and hair. Her arm burned where something had grazed it, the sleeve torn and blood-spotted. Her hands trembled, not from cold anymore, but pure adrenaline crash. "You're hurt," Jiwon said, his attention snapping back to her. "I'm fine. You're bleeding. So are you." He wiped blood from his eyebrow with the back of his hand, barely acknowledging it. Then his fingers were on her arm, examining the wound with clinical detachment that somehow felt intimate. His touch was surprisingly gentle, considering those same hands had just killed people with ruthless efficiency. "Graze," he pronounced. Lucky, I just threw boiling oil on someone and got shot at in a rice storage room. That's your definition of lucky? You're alive. That's the only definition that matters." The driver said something in Korean. Jiwon responded, then turned back to her. "We're going somewhere safe, somewhere they won't look tonight." "There, you mean Isabella and whoever Minseok is?" His jaw tightened at the name. "My half-brother, older by 3 years, meaner by a lifetime. I thought he was running operations in Busan. Apparently I was wrong. And Isabella was his from the beginning. The whole engagement was a setup, a way to get close enough to kill me without raising suspicion." He said it with cold pragmatism, like discussing a failed business deal. The pregnancy was probably his too, insurance if she couldn't pull off the hit, an heir to legitimize his claim. The casual way he dissected it made her skin crawl. "Where are you taking me?" Jiwon studied her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost kind, which somehow made it more terrifying. Home. Home was not a word she'd have used. Prison, maybe. Fortress, definitely. The compound sat in Seongbuk-dong, surrounded by walls that looked designed to keep out armies. They passed through 2 security checkpoints, both requiring retinal scans and codes the driver rattled off in Korean. The house itself was pure brutalism. Concrete and glass, all harsh angles and uncompromising lines. No warmth, no softness, just power rendered in architecture. Floodlights illuminated the perimeter, turning the falling snow into a blizzard of white static against darkness. They pulled into an underground garage that could house a small military. The Stinger's engine cut, and suddenly the silence was oppressive. Jiwon exited with fluid grace. Thandiwe followed on legs that felt disconnected from her body, adrenaline giving way to bone-deep exhaustion. The elevator required keycard and fingerprint. The ride up was smooth, silent. Jiwon stood beside her, close enough she could feel heat radiating from his body, sharp contrast to the cold concrete surrounding them. "You're shaking," he observed. "I'm freezing." He shrugged off his ruined jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It was still warm from his body, smelled like expensive cologne mixed with gunpowder and blood. She pulled it tighter, hatting how good it felt. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Seoul, the city glittering below like scattered diamonds. The furniture was minimal, expensive, arranged with geometric precision. Everything was grey: concrete floors, steel fixtures, charcoal upholstery. Even the art was monochromatic. Beautiful the way a knife is beautiful. 3 men in tactical gear waited. They straightened when Ji-won entered, speaking rapid Korean. Reports from the way Ji-won's expression darkened with each sentence. He barked orders and 2 left immediately. The third approached Thandiwe, hand extended. "Phone," she blinked. "What, your phone?" Ji-won translated, voice flat. "Give it to him." "Why?" "Because I said so." The casual dominance sent a spike of anger through her exhaustion. "I need to call my father, tell him I'm okay." "Your father is fine. I had my people check 30 minutes ago. He's asleep in his hospital bed in Accra, completely unaware his daughter just survived a shootout." "That doesn't mean—" "Thandiwe." He didn't raise his voice, but command filled it. Now, she wanted to refuse to tell him he had no right, but the man in tactical gear was waiting, and Ji-won was watching her with those obsidian eyes that saw everything. She pulled her phone from her apron and placed it in the man's palm. He took it without a word and left. The elevator doors closed. "You can't keep me here," she said, trying for defiant, landing on terrified. "Can't I?" He poured amber liquid into a crystal glass. "What's your alternative?" "Walk out into the snow and hope the Rossi family doesn't find you. Go home and wait for a bullet." "I didn't do anything wrong. You saved my life. In my world, that makes you either valuable or dangerous, sometimes both." He moved toward her, each step measured, predatory. "The people who tried to kill me tonight don't care that you were innocent. They want to know what you saw, what you heard, whether you're a problem." He stopped inches away. This close she could see gold flecks in his irises, the scar on his eyebrow, his pulse beating in his throat. "So no, you can't leave. Not until I figure out how to keep you alive. By making me your prisoner, by making you my responsibility. There's a difference. Not from where I'm standing." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You're brave for someone who served food 2 hours ago, and you're arrogant for someone who almost died tonight. Almost doesn't count in my business. You either survive or you don't." Despite everything, she almost laughed. The sound died when his hand came up, fingers brushing her jaw with unexpected gentleness. He tilted her face toward the light, examining the cut on her arm, the rice in her hair, how she trembled. "You need to clean up, eat something, then we'll talk." "Talk about what?" He stopped, thumb pressing against her pulse point, feeling her heartbeat race. "About why you're looking at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you can't decide if you want to kill me or kiss me." The accusation hung between them, dangerous and true, because he was right. Somewhere in the chaos and